Two Liberal state governments are out to promote their global warming credentials. The Berejiklian government in New South Wales and the Marshall government in South Australia are both promising to be carbon neutral within 30 years. I don't know who's going to hold them to that promise. At least Gladys Berejiklian has signed a gas deal with the Prime Minister. Gas generation produces half the emissions of coal-fired electricity, but unlike wind and solar, it's reliable. It's power when we need it. But the desperation of Berejiklian and Stephen Marshall in South Australia to appease the Green left by making bold promises on emissions and renewable energy is weak government, transparent politicking that just makes it harder for coalition governments to stick to rational policies, small government and economic development. They really should leave climate policy to the national government, which after all is responsible for foreign affairs and treaties such as the Paris Climate Agreement. Instead, they can't help seeking some love and affirmation from the noisy activists, rent-seeking corporates, woke business people and the Green left media led by the public broadcasters. And of course, all of the cost of their political vanity will be borne by us. South Australia's annual emissions are about 26 million tonnes, and that compares to China's at 11,000 million tonnes. So South Australia's annual emissions amount to less than 1 day of China's. Even New South Wales emissions amount to only about 4 days of China's. The annual growth in China's emissions adds another South Australia's worth of greenhouse gases every month, adding new emissions totalling more than the whole of Australia's annual emissions at least every year. So say what you will about doing our bit and setting an example, but please don't pretend that you're going to change the climate. And especially don't try and tell your constituents that as well as making their electricity more expensive and less reliable, you're going to somehow cool down the summers that have always been hot and dry and always will be. And they've always brought with them the threat of deadly bushfires, and they always will. Don't pretend you can somehow reduce that bushfire threat. This is a cruel and deceptive political ploy that holds out false hope to anyone gullible enough to believe it. Politicians promoting climate action need to be honest. They want to reduce emissions because they think there's a political demand for it, because they want to silence their critics, because they want to feel like they are part of a fashionable movement in a global campaign. And they might even think that 2, 3 or 4 decades down the track, when and if other countries around the world join in, they might be able to prevent the planet getting any hotter than it is by then. But they can't possibly be silly enough to think that their policies will ameliorate or reduce the bushfire risk or deliver any discernible improvement in our climate in any way, shape or form. And they shouldn't insult the intelligence of voters by pretending they might fall for this rot either.